Welcome to the Stories in EDU podcast, the show where we talk with real educators and hear their powerful impact. Their stories will grab you, inspire you, and show you the reach of the work we do. And now, the Bretzman Group presents your hosts, Josh Gauthier and Mandy Taylor.
Welcome back to another episode of the Stories in EDU podcast, the podcast where you get to hear great stories from educators all across the country and the world. At least we've had a couple from other parts of the world. Yeah. So a little over a week ago, I had a really cool opportunity. I got to go with some students and our library media specialist and another teacher. And we went to hear an author speak by the name of Ruta Sepetys. She wrote the book that I read that she wrote was called Salt to the Sea, which is a fabulous book. Everybody should read it. But she also wrote one that might be more popular called Between Shades of Grey, not to be confused with the other Shades of Grey book. I
appreciate that distinction.
Yes. She
for
spoke
this
for
education podcast.
She spoke for an hour, and it was so incredible. And to have 12 students who got to be there to be a part of it was really cool. But my favorite part of the day, that was awesome. Don't get me wrong. It was great. I got my book signed. She said some encouraging things to me, which is great. But afterwards, we went to go eat lunch with the kids. And it was so cool to just get to sit and hang out with students with absolutely no strings attached. We don't have to be learning something. We don't have 45 minutes until the bell rings. We don't have disruptions. We're here just having lunch together. And it was so cool just hanging out and talking about Pokemon Go and Lord of the Rings and just all of this random stuff with these kids. And just it was really neat. And I hope it's an experience I'm not going to forget about, but I hope that they connect with that somehow and helps them see that we're all real people too who, enjoy eating and The Hobbit and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that was kind of cool about a week ago. Anything new in your world, Mandy?
No, we had round one of our state testing. So I'm glad that has come to a close. Now we've got a couple more weeks, and my daughter is in 5th grade, and she's going this week to an OLC. It's their outdoor learning camp. So they'll spend 2 nights away in a camp situation with all of the 5th grade from our campus, and they do all kinds of activities, camp activities, but they do team building and, like you said, just eating together and hanging out. And it's kind of their last little thing before they go off to middle school. And so my 8th grader is telling Mallory about everything that she's going to do and what she needs to, since he's lived his life, so much fuller than she has. He always has this great stage advice for her and all these things. And she kept saying, I know. And it was just so fun. They're so different. We had to okay, do you have underwear? Do you have shirts? And I went in her room. She was packing every outfit for the day is wrapped up together, everything she needs. And it's got a rubber band around it, her ponytail holder that so she's got her little my kids could not be more different. It's so funny to watch them navigate similar situations into completely different ways because they are hysterically different. But I'm going to miss her, but I'm excited. And then it means I have a kid going to high school and middle school in 1 year. So
oh man,
I'm feeling a little old.
Well, it'll be fun to keep up on those adventures as long as we keep doing this podcast. We'll be able to follow the journeys of your kids. And one person that we're excited to follow the journey of is our guest tonight, Tisha Richmond from Oregon. Tisha, welcome to Stories in EDU.
Hello, it's such an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're at the honor stage now. People are honored to be here, Mandy. This is so cool.
Well, you may not know this, Josh, about Tisha and I, but we go way, way back to the Snapchats. And we actually communicate on a pretty daily, weekly basis with a group of us that are keeping in communication on the Snap. So it's really exciting for me to have Tisha on today because I feel so already deeply connected to her on a vocal level because of all the singing that's involved in our exchanges.
Probably heavily warped with some crazy filters, I'm sure. I know a little bit about Snapchat, not as much as I should, but I've tried. Anyways, Tisha, for those that don't know who you are, can you tell us just a little bit about where you're at, what you're doing, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So I am a culinary arts teacher in Southern Oregon. I have been at my current school going on 13 years. And I also am the Discovery lead teacher. We have small learning communities at our high school. And so I lead a group of about 500 kids and 25 teachers in our Discovery learning community. So I absolutely love what I do. It's so much fun, and every day is definitely an adventure.
Cool thing about Tisha with her culinary arts is she's always posting the food that her kids make in their classes. And I'm always like, do you ship to Texas? But everything looks delicious.
Yeah, I do follow Tisha and have for some time, and definitely we see lots of food and we see lots of great learning. So before we get into all of the great stories Tisha has to tell us tonight, we are going to do our lightning round really quick just to whet the appetites of everybody in the room or wherever it is you are listening to this. So our card tonight is gamify it. Tell a story about how you gamified a lesson, a unit, or a class. What was the background story or what was the game structure? What advice can you give to others about gamification? And did you get any useful tips from the Explore Like a Pirate book by Michael Matera? #XP. All right, so I'm going to put a minute up on the clock for us.
Okay, I'm going to talk really fast because I have so much to share about this. But I will share one of my classes, which is my Culinary 3, and we learn about American regional cuisine. So we have this food truck race, and we're on a race across the United States from Medford, Oregon to Medford, Maine. Students create food truck names, concepts, and signature dishes. They pitch it to an authentic audience of staff members and food truck owners and local chefs that come in to hear their pitch. And then we go from one region of the United States to another, learning about the flavor profiles and cuisines. And at the end of each unit, students present this signature dish to an authentic audience that comes back. And so they take their concept. So let's say we have one food truck called Crepe Diem. They take those crepes and they adapt it to the flavor profiles and cuisine of the Southwest and the Midwest and the Northeast. And they have to do their homework. They've got to do their research and really be able to explain to this authentic audience how they recreated their dish. And it's absolutely amazing.
That sounds incredible, and I can't wait to dive more into that as we discuss further. That's cool. You need to add a midway point and stop in Medford, Wisconsin on your way across.
Wisconsin, I didn't know.
My wife and I lived in Medford, Wisconsin for a year.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to write that down.
It was always fun like Googling Medford because Medford, Oregon would always be what would pop up and not Medford, Wisconsin if you weren't paying attention. So there's just a little story. I don't think they have regional cuisine there. We did enjoy the Hardee's often. It's one of the few establishments in town. It's pretty exciting. They had a Walmart that was pretty new when we were there. In any case, Mandy, you can go ahead whenever you want.
So a couple of years ago, I was a very, very new instructional coach. And so one of the things we did for back to school professional development was go through the beginning of the year kind of nonsense that you have to do where you go through the handbook and you go through over all these things that you are required to do, but nobody really enjoys. And the longer you've been there, the less you enjoy it. And so I just made like a little game board and had links and things like that, kind of like a scavenger hunt, kind of like a game. But then people that wanted to be competitive could be competitive. People that wanted to do it on their own could do it that way. Because I'm not a competitive person. My personality gets really anxious when we have races and things like that. I can't watch The Amazing Race because it stresses me out. I get too panicky. It's just something weird about my personality. So this way, everybody gets to kind of do their own way, and it turned out to be fun. We had prizes and things like that.
Love it.
Excellent. Oh, what direction am I going to go? We're going to pull one from the vault.
Oh.
All right. So a few years back when I was in the classroom, we made a slight shift in our schedule at the middle school. And I used to teach business ed, which was mostly technology related classes in the middle school. And every kid was required to take my classes until they switched around the schedule for different reasons. And then all of a sudden every class but my 6th grade one was no longer required. And there were like a lot of electives and not a lot of kids. So like getting 10 kids in your class was like a coup because there just wasn't a lot. So I had done this personalized blended learning with my 7th grade class, and then decided that moving forward, I wanted to connect all of my classes. So I created this storyline that was going to go throughout all 4, and then there were some game mechanics, which were more well thought out in the first 2. And they worked okay. I did some badging. My 7th grade one was probably the most well thought out. And the sad part is I never really got to finish it because then I switched jobs. And I have no idea what happened to that, but I can imagine the next person seeing all of that and being like, what was this guy on? Yeah, we're not doing this. So in any case, enough about that, because I want to talk about some people who are highly successful with their gamification and kind of the journey they've been on with that. And that's what Tisha is here for. So Tisha, you mentioned this food truck race.
Yes.
That's going on there. And that harkens back to me, the TV show that was on for a little bit where there was that amazing food truck race. And that was a really interesting show. And I'm sure that was an inspiration in some ways for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, most of the game structures that I have are all inspired by TV and by the Food Network and all these amazing shows that they have on. So I definitely find inspiration in watching those television shows, and that was the launching point for that theme, the Great Food Truck Race.
Interesting. Do you find that the students are aware of these references, and that is something that they're like, oh, I love that show, so I'm excited about this, or are some of them unaware, and like where does that fall when you introduce something like that?
I think you get both responses. Some are familiar, some aren't. But I find that if you can start out your game with all of this enthusiasm and excitement, they catch on to that. And if you're excited about it, it's contagious and they get excited about it too. So I think it's funny because the Amazing Race show was so popular for so long, and there's a lot of kids who have no idea what I'm talking about when I talk about the Amazing Race, when I launched that, because I have a game called the Amazing Race too that I do for international cuisine. So yeah, it's just kind of across the board. You get those kids who are familiar and you get those kids that don't, but I find that it doesn't really matter.
Well, and I've kind of seen too, there's a noticeable difference in the way that our family does TV now with just things like Netflix and Hulu, and the ability to kind of watch anything we want whenever we want to watch it. And so one of the things we've recognized is that we don't know when movies come out because we don't watch TV to watch the commercials for movies that were targeted to the age group of the shows we were watching, and so the other day the kids were like, can we go to a movie? I'm like, what movie? They're like, I don't know, what's out? And I was like, I don't know. And so it's funny how you were kind of talking about something that was popular for all of us, that they've never even seen before, because they get things from YouTube. Then, their kind of TV is almost social media, I would think, because that's where they're getting targeted and, some of those things like that. So can I hold you for just a minute? Because I want to know more about your small learning community. You said you were the leader of, tell me what that is.
So back, oh my goodness, I think it was about 2006. There was this Bill Gates grant that we got as a school to start these small learning communities on campus. And so what it is we have a school of about 2,000 students, and we have 4 small learning communities. So everybody that starts their freshman year are in Freshman Academy. So Freshman Academy is basically the entire freshman class. And then in the springtime, the freshmen get to choose which of the 3 other learning communities they want to go into their sophomore year. And so we have 3 learning communities that are focused on sophomore through seniors. We have our box school, which is kind of our school that focuses on the arts. And so
Okay.
it's our theater and our 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional art, music, band. And then we have our champs, which is more medical focused. And then we have discovery, which our acronym is BEST for business, environment, service, and technology. And so sometimes some schools have taken a very independent approach where every small school has their own group of electives and they're very isolated. But we took a different approach at our school. And so students in any one of those small learning communities can mix their electives. So for instance, for my culinary classes, I have students that are in champs, Bach, discovery, freshman academy, all over. But what makes the learning community special is that each learning community has this core group of teachers that teach all of those kids. And so their core subjects, they have this set of teachers. And so the beauty in that is that those teachers meet for a period every day or every 2 out of 3 days, the way our schedule works. And so as a lead teacher during that class period, I meet with those core teachers and we plan interventions and we plan field experiences and we help build school culture. And we just really try to give individualized attention to those students so they feel like they're not in this huge school of 2,000, even though they are, but they have this tight group of teachers that are really trying to individualize their learning and be there for them and help them through their high school experience.
Okay, thanks. I've got an 8th grader that's going to high school, and that's one of the things I keep thinking about is this idea of just it being so big and he's going to get lost. And, I mean, I kind of felt like that when he moved from elementary to middle school, but now even just knowing, so I'm just always interested when people have ideas and, different ways. So Thanks for letting me divert the question from the process here for a minute.
Absolutely.
That is actually, I'm glad you asked that because I kind of glossed over it and I didn't quite understand what you had meant when you said that initially. And so I think in my mind, I'm like, well, I know what I want to ask you about, so I'm not going to so I'm glad, Mandy, that stood out to you because now I'm like, well, that's really cool. And, I think we should look at doing something like that. I think that's great. I mean, especially our schools right now, I mean, we're bursting at the seams with kids, which is kind of a good problem to have. But then, when you get to those big organizational sizes, it's really hard to have good relationships with people there because there's too many people. So as far as gamification goes, for me, probably the first time I heard about it would have been 2012-ish or 13. And for those who are listening that might not know what that is, that's the idea of using game elements in an instructional environment, at least when we're talking about education. I mean, Starbucks is gamified. Don't you get points whenever you go and buy stuff at Starbucks and you get free stuff? That's gamified to get you to come back. And that's what teachers like Tisha and others have tried to do. So can you take us back to, if you can, one of the first years that you did this and maybe there's a specific student story that highlights what kept you going?
Sure. Well, this all became something that I dove into in 2014. And actually, it was when I met Michael Matera. So I was at Miami Device in Florida. It's a conference in November of 2014. And I had just come out of a session and I was merging into this lunch line. And Michael Matera was in line in front of me and didn't know who he was at the time. Didn't know anything about gamification at the time. Didn't go to a session. And we just started chatting. And as he was talking, I was thinking, oh my goodness, this makes so much sense. I mean, I love doing chop challenges in my class and mystery box challenges, but it's always been these isolated things that I do. And kids are always asking, well, when can I do that? When can we do that again? And I'm like, oh, well, maybe we'll have time at the end of the semester. Or I'd always push it off because I always felt like it was just a thing that would take away from the other learning that was happening. But when I started talking to Michael, it really started shifting my thinking. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this could totally transform the way I do things instead of just being these isolated times. And so I got back from the conference and I was just trying to wrap my head around it. And I continued talking to Michael. And at the end of that year, I was heading into the last quarter of the semester. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to jump in. I was super scared, but I'm like, I'm just going to dive in. I was going to go to this conference and I was going to show the 100-Foot Journey, which was this movie. I'm like, what if I tied in this 100-Foot Journey movie into my game? And so that's exactly what I did. And my students were on a quest to earn these Michelin stars. And to be honest, I wish I would have documented that game better because that was the only semester, that was the only quarter that I've ever done that game. But what I found was that kids it was like electric. Like when I changed this learning environment and I rolled out this theme, students were excited and they were immersed and there was this level of electricity that was in the room that wasn't before. And I mean, I teach an elective, it's a class that students typically want to take, but it definitely changed the feeling of the classroom environment. And so after that quarter, I knew that this is something that I definitely want to continue and see how I can do this long term instead of just being a thing that I did for a quarter, that this could be something that could be done and layered over my entire course in culinary arts.
Well, and I wonder too, like, which way is it the chicken or the egg? Like, do you have, I mean, clearly you have your curriculum, but then do you have like an idea for a game and then you try to make it fit? Or do you try to find pieces and parts and start from scratch? You know what I mean? Like, what's the process when you decide to do something like this?
So when I first tried to wrap my head around this concept, I was overwhelmed by it. I'm like, Michael, I have no idea where to start. Like the whole thing stresses me out. And he's like, Tisha, just find a theme. Find a theme that you can latch onto, and then let that start this adventure, and everything will fall into place. He's like, I promise you it will. And I was leery. I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's pretty overwhelming for me right now. And I did. And when I found that theme, then my mind just started like thinking of all of these things that can be connected. And it became this thing that I layered over my curriculum. So I started with the theme. I figured out what was my setting going to be like, what was I transforming my classroom into, what characters were going to be involved in this game, what kind of action is going to happen in the game. And then I started thinking of these game mechanics that I could use. Am I going to do levels? Am I going to have badges? Is there going to be experience points involved? Are we going to be going on these quests? Like, what kind of mechanics do I want to layer in? And I did not change my content. So especially in my Culinary 2 class, my units of study are exactly the same units that I've always had. A lot of my lab experiences and the things that they make in labs are the same as they've always been. It's just there's this gamified structure that's layered over everything that immerses them in a different way and makes everything gel together really well.
Well, and I work with K-5 teachers, and so I feel like, especially the younger ones, we kind of think about everything through games, because even the very basic, when you're talking about learning math structures and we're learning about sight words and things like that, we don't just memorize sight words and stuff. We do things through games. So it may be a Candyland game and everybody's working on their own list, a personalized list and things like that. But I'm kind of trying to think about it through, like, not only our teachers, but in my role, what we can do to make PD more interesting, more, like a theme for the whole year and some different things like that. So of course, like you said, your mind's just, but it makes me think of children's birthday parties, like, because I am a like, I love a good theme. That's why I do elementary school so well, because like when my kids would pick their theme, then the food came out of that and the ideas and the way we would decorate and everything. And it all contributed to that bigger piece, the prizes and the gift bags and, everything like that. So I think, like you said, it just, once you get something like that kids will, buy into, then you kind of, everything takes its own turn. So now I'm trying to decide what I could do to utilize some of those elements too.
And so many teachers are already using gamified strategies in their classroom anyway. They just don't think about it. And I think what you can do with gamification is you just tie all those things together. So all of these games and things that you do already are played together with this kind of overarching theme. And it just makes everything, very cohesive. And I think the beauty too is that you don't have to have it figured out all at once. So you can start this game and have kind of a basic structure and you kind of know what your basic mechanics are going to be, but there's twists and turns all along the way. And it's not a cookie cutter thing. Every single semester that I've launched this game, it's taken slightly different turns. It's the basic same structure, but I'll have an idea about, adding in this one element and I'll just run with it. Or I have students that will at the end of the semester give me ideas for badges and different elements of my game. And so I take those ideas and I run with it the next time. And so I think a lot of times people get scared thinking, oh my goodness, in order to launch this thing, I've got to have it dialed in and I've got to have it perfect and everything like tied in this beautiful little bow. And it really isn't like that. And that was hard for me at first because I am kind of one of those people that wants everything tied in a really good bow before I start it and have it planned out. But you really don't have to. You really can just go and then let the game evolve and feed off of the kids. And when they get excited about something and when they give you ideas, run with it and let the game evolve.
So real quick, as we kind of approach the end of our time together here, is there like a student quote? Is there I mean, I know you have a book that we'll talk about in a second that's going to be coming out, but is there like a student quote that sticks with you from their experience in your class? And what's one of the things that a student has recommended or suggested that you've since incorporated?
I was just at this awards banquet this last week, and they put together this video, and my students, they interview kids, and I don't have no idea what they say, but they interview these kids, and they then incorporate it into this video. And I can't wait to hear it again, because I was so overwhelmed by the experience that I don't remember exactly what they said, but they talked about how learning was fun and how they were inspired by the positivity that was brought into the classroom, and that learning was an adventure. And I think, that is so important to me. I want my classroom to be filled with joy and passion and fun and a love for learning. And I really want my class to be memorable. So 20 years from now, when students are either making dinner for their family or they're in industry working maybe in the back or the front of the house, I want them to think back on culinary arts and think, wow, that was so fun. Like, those were building blocks for me for a lifetime of learning, and that's the most important thing for me. Sure, I am helping teach the skills that they can use in industry and to have a career in culinary arts and hospitality. But more importantly, I want them to love how to cook. I want them to continue cooking when they leave my class. And so if we can create these memorable learning experiences for them where they really enjoy the learning process, then they're much more likely to continue once they leave.
Excellent. Excellent. So as we wrap up here, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but you are working on a book, correct?
I am.
So what are we looking for that to come out? What can people expect to find in there?
Yes. So I am completely honored to be writing a book for Dave Burgess Consulting, and I am just about in the editing phase where it's going to go into someone else's hands, and they'll be working with it, and I'm hoping that it will be out sometime in fall. or winter of this year. I don't know an exact date yet, but that's kind of the timeline that we're shooting for. And the book title, as of now, is Make Learning Magical. And it's all about ways that learning has become magical in my classroom. I talk about the importance of magical beginnings and establishing just a great relationships with kids from the beginning, and really creating that awesome classroom culture, giving students agency and just being authentic, our authentic selves in our classrooms. Gamified strategies, I talk about how I have transformed my classroom with these strategies. Innovation, how I'm continually taking risks and learning and modeling that risk-taking and innovation with my students, in hopes that they will then feel safe to take risks and to innovate as well. Creativity and collaboration. My classroom is daily creating, they're daily collaborating. My students work in teams, and it's been really, really powerful. And to see kids being creative and collaborating, and how it's really empowered them in very powerful ways. And then bringing in authentic audience, how I invite our community and our staff in, and seeing my students shine when they are able to present in front of an authentic audience has been just amazing. And then leaving a legacy. I want my students to leave my classroom and be ready to leave a legacy. And so I'm really excited, and it's really a very, very surreal experience, to be honest, to be writing a book, but I can't wait.
Super excited. Well, I can't wait to get my hands on that. So before we let you go tonight, where can, besides purchasing your book when it comes out, can people who are listening find out more about you and keep up with the great things you're doing, and maybe ask you some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Twitter handle is @TishRich. I live on Twitter, and I love to communicate and join in on Twitter chats. I co-moderate with Michael Matera every Tuesday night, 7 Pacific Standard Time, for XP-Lab. And it's an amazing community of educators that are gamifying and just doing fabulous things in their classroom. So definitely connect with that community and Michael Matera. I also write a blog on tisharrichmond.com, and that's just where I reflect on teaching and learning and share the things that are happening in my classroom. And you can find me there as well.
Excellent. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to talk to you tonight, and we'll be excited to hopefully someday have you back and share some more stories about your classroom, maybe some new things you're working on in the future.
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Thanks, Tisha.
Well, that was really cool, and I'm struck by this. Being, in my background, being kind of in that elective area. You know, one of the benefits of being an elective teacher is the kids who take your class are like kids who want to be there usually.
Right.
And what I just love is that she could have just simply rested on that and been like, well, we're making food. Like, kids just like making food. Like, I'm just going to do my thing and it'll be fine. But, you know, that idea that it can be better. There's more that can be done and accomplished. I really, really, really liked that. I thought that was such a cool thing to think about for all of us as teachers, that there's always something more we can do to make our class that much more engaging and exciting.
Well, and the thing that really stuck out to me, I wrote it down on my little attempts at my sad little attempts at sketchnoting, is that she kept talking about authentic audience. And I know that's kind of a buzzword right now, the way that gamification is, but in 2001, when I went through the writing project for the first time, authentic audience was part of the presentation that I gave. And back then, we weren't using social media. We weren't using Twitter for, you know, and it was just such a different way of really writing and mailing your letter to someone and writing and having other people read it and sending it home to mom and dad and, you know, things like that. And I think that now, because of where we are in the world, there are so many opportunities for authentic audience. And I think that if we don't hone in on that we're missing some valuable opportunities with our kids, because when my child asks, why do I need to know this? That's really not being defiant. It's not being disrespectful. And I think a lot of teachers still kind of think about that. And it really is it's searching for the purpose. And I remember that Madeline Hunter, when I was in college and we learned about the Madeline Hunter lesson plan, after you state the objective, the very next thing you say is, this is why it's important that you know this. And it's really just the idea of establishing that purpose. This is why you need to learn blah, blah, blah. And if we don't have a good answer, why are we teaching it? And I think that like she's saying, it's relevant because much like a reading teacher, when the kids leave, you want them to be lifelong readers. It struck me because she said, I want them to cook for their families. I want them to enjoy cooking. And it's that same idea of the teacher wanting the kids to use their content knowledge to enjoy their life more. And I think that idea of audience, and she said, they could, just like you said, they could taste each other's food, but she brings in local chefs and people from around their community. That is establishing that authentic audience. And those kids may interview for those people eventually. And, all of those pieces work together, I think, for not just building like a buzz and the fun, but really helping kids plug into what the relevance of, why this is important. And I want to emulate that in all the different situations, and in math and science and social studies and reading and all of these different areas. Why does this matter to me as a kindergartner, as a fifth grader, as a high school student?
Indeed. And my favorite part about all of that, to kind of wrap it all together in the bow, is that kind of going back to what you said about she wants them to cook for their families, and that you're so hyper-focused on like jobs and careers and all of this that we forget that there's this whole other human aspect of life that we want students to be good at too, that we want them to be good humans and good people. And that part to me is probably the greatest part of all, is that there's this lifelong skill that they're learning here, much like reading or math or other things like that. And that gamification helps kind of take that home for the kids. So really enjoyed our conversation with her tonight. And if you've got any like gamification questions, or maybe you've got your own gamified class that you're doing right now, maybe you didn't know you were doing it, but you are, we'd love to hear about it. Feel free to reach out to Mandy or myself on Twitter at either Mandy M. Taylor or Mr. G Fact of the Day. And we'd love to hear about your gamification stories. And if you want to share them, feel free to reach out. We'd love to have you on the podcast sometime to share some stories about what's happening in your classroom. Of course, you can tune in every Tuesday night for a new episode. That's usually when they go live, sometimes Wednesday. Just keep sharing and listening to these stories, because that's what makes our profession great. And we're happy to have you as a listener on this podcast, and we hope you'll join us once again. So on behalf of Mandy and myself, safe travels, or take care wherever you're at, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stories in EDU podcast. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, thanks again.